Monday morning in San Francisco always smelled faintly of burnt espresso and ambition. The 34th floor conference room was a glass cage, overlooking the bay and the streaming traffic below. I balanced my paper cup of coffee in one hand and the slim folder of last week's deployment reports in the other. I expected another architecture review routine, clinical. The kind where no one truly listened until something went wrong. Gareth Sloan strolled in 5 minutes late. As usual, his sneakers squeaking softly on the polished floor. He didn't greet anyone, he only tapped his laptop, and the screen on the wall lit up with a single slide in stark white and navy legacy retirement Selena Vera. It took my brain a full 3 seconds to process it. My name, right there, like a product they were phasing out. I froze with my cup halfway to my lips. The room was suddenly colder than the air conditioning could explain. Gareth leaned back in his chair and grinned, the kind of grin that belonged in glossy magazines about disruption and leadership. "Our outdated architecture has served its time," he said, his voice syrupy with mock praise. "We're moving forward without it or her." A ripple of uneasy laughter broke across the table. One of the interns, Maya, the one who still asked me about code reviews, closed her laptop with trembling fingers and stared down at her hands. Most of the others looked at Gareth, then at me, then away. They wanted no part of whatever this was. I felt the burn rise in my chest, but my face stayed neutral. I had learned long ago that in boardrooms, emotion was a weapon for someone else to wield against you. I made a single note in my folder, just a dot, and set the pen down. Gareth advanced to the next slide, a shiny mock-up of future infrastructure, all bright clouds and buzzwords. He never mentioned the 11 years I had spent holding this company's digital spine together, the nights I patched systems alone while the city slept, or the weekends I logged in from my sister's garage during storms. To him, I was a relic. I took a slow breath, placed my coffee on the table, and listened. On the outside, I was the silent dinosaur they thought they'd already buried. On the inside, gears began to turn, lining up every memory, every document, every decision I'd made in quiet preparation for the day they would try to erase me. By the time the meeting ended, I walked out without a word, my folder under my arm and a single thought threading through my mind, already pulling me toward the next move waiting at home. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky over the bay was turning copper, and the lights on the bridge shimmered like a line of distant, indifferent stars. I set my keys on the counter and let the quiet swallow me whole. The conference room, the slide with my name fading into irrelevance, Gareth's smirk, they all followed me inside, settling into the walls like ghosts. I dropped onto the couch, the severance packet still in my hand, transition support package in bold letters across the top, the NDA like a muzzle tucked inside, 14 pages to erase 12 years of my life. I flipped through them slowly, the paper whispering in a language I already understood. "You're disposable." Through the window. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, ferries cutting across the darkening water, traffic crawling over the bridge, all that life moving forward, and me sitting in a box of stillness. I thought about all the nights I'd kept that company alive, deploying patches by flashlight during a hurricane, logging in from a motel room while rain hammered the roof, coding through birthdays and funerals without a thank you. I had been everywhere for them. And somehow, I'd been invisible the entire time. The folder sat on the coffee table, thick with the weight of my quiet insurance patent filings, LLC documents, notarized receipts. I ran my fingers over it, my chest tight. For a moment, I considered shredding it all, letting them win, disappearing like they wanted me to. My hand hovered over the lid of the shredder, and a sharp breath caught in my throat. Then my phone buzzed, a Slack notification from Theo, one of the few who still had a conscience. "You need to see this." I opened the screenshot. On my screen was a snippet of the new modern architecture Gareth had boasted about, highlighted in yellow: my schema, my load balancer logic, my system in a borrowed suit. I leaned back, the weight in my chest shifting, hardening into something colder. They hadn't just humiliated me, they were building their 5 million dream on the bones of my work. I closed the severance folder, slid the patent binder onto my lap, and felt the room sharpen around me, as if the city outside had finally turned to face me. It was time to start pulling the threads I'd left buried for years, one by one, until the whole facade began to unravel. I moved from the living room to my small home office, a cramped corner of the apartment where the walls were lined with shelves of hard drives and old binders. Dust caught the glow of my desk lamp as I pulled the heavy folder toward me. My fingers traced the edges of the papers, the weight of a decade's worth of quiet insurance. I opened it and saw the familiar name printed on each cover sheet: Revoked Systems, LLC. 8 patents, each one filed under that name, notarized, time-stamped, and carefully sealed. I had started filing them the second year into the job. After the first time management hinted that contractor flexibility might replace loyalty, I paid the fees out of my own pocket. I'd walk to a notary on my lunch break, sat under flickering fluorescent lights, and signed each page with the steady hand of someone who didn't trust applause to protect her work. Every detail was there: method diagrams, architectural schemas. The backbone of the system they now claimed was obsolete. On the desk, my cat, Pixel, brushed against my leg and meowed softly. I bent down and scratched behind her ears, whispering, "They think I'm obsolete, watch me." Her purr filled the room, grounding me, reminding me that this wasn't just about pride. This was about survival, about making sure the years I'd given weren't stolen without consequence. I scrolled through my external drives, double-checking the backups I'd made, screenshots of Slack threads where my suggestions were ignored, the original source code with my naming conventions, time-stamped commits. Each file was a brick in the fortress I'd built around myself, invisible but impenetrable. I had been patient, silent, waiting for the day they overstepped. Now, the overstep wasn't a theory, it was a screenshot in my phone. Theo's message proof that Gareth had taken my skeleton and dressed it in new colors. My heart steadied as the pieces clicked into place. Silence was no longer a weight, it was leverage. I leaned back in my chair, the patent folder open across my lap, and let the plan settle in my mind. Everything I needed to defend my work and destroy theirs was already here, waiting for the right moment to move from quiet protection to undeniable action. 3 days after I walked out of that glass box for the last time, the performance began. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, scrolling through LinkedIn. There he was, Gareth Sloan, beaming under the fluorescent glow of the office, flanked by 3 consultants in matching navy hoodies with the company logo splashed across their chests. The caption read, "Legacy is dead. Welcome to the future. Proud to launch our next-generation architecture with the best team in the business." The post had 100 likes already, little thumbs and clapping emojis from people who had no idea they were applauding a corpse propped up in a hoodie. I stared at the photo a moment longer, then swiped to the next image in the carousel, a dashboard screenshot, all bright graphs and clean tiles. My eyes narrowed. Behind the shiny front end, in the corner of a window someone had carelessly left open. I saw it, my work, the schema I had designed years ago, the structure of my caching layer. Even the naming convention in the URL parameters was mine, a breadcrumb trail for anyone who knew where to look. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitter taste sit on my tongue. Every like, every comment, every emoji on Gareth's post was another nail waiting for the right hammer. He wasn't just bragging. He was documenting his own theft in public, framing it like a magazine cover. Notifications buzzed, company-wide emails forwarded by Theo landed in my inbox. Phrases like agile migration and legacy-free infrastructure jumped out at me. I scrolled through screenshots of internal presentations Gareth had given to the board. The slides were littered with diagrams I recognized, modified just enough to make him believe he had made them new. The arrogance was almost cinematic. He was live streaming his own confession, too confident to imagine someone like me was still watching from the shadows. He thought I had taken my little severance and vanished into the fog, that I was licking my wounds in silence. In truth, I was cataloging every post, every slide, every casual comment he left online. Each one was evidence, a thread I could weave into a net he wouldn't see until it was already around his neck. I saved the images into a folder I'd named Admitted Intent. My cursor hovered for a moment, then I added a fresh note to my timeline. The theater was running at full curtain, and the audience didn't even know the stage was rigged to collapse. By Saturday morning, my dining table had transformed into a war room, patent folders, hard drives, and a half-drained mug of cold coffee fought for space among the clutter. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping the surface with bars of pale gold that made the scene look like an evidence board for a crime no one else knew had been committed yet. Theo Park had been true to his word. Overnight, he sent me a folder of screenshots from the internal Slack channels developers joking about Fraggle loops and legacy hacks, which were my shorthand comments, lifted wholesale from my original code. One image made me pause a message from a junior dev asking, "Is this actually new? Looks like Selena's old stuff, but shiny." The reply from a consultant, "Don't ask questions, just push." I added the screenshots to my timeline. Beside them, I pinned Gareth's LinkedIn selfies, each one practically signed in his own arrogance. Diagrams of next-gen dashboards with my architecture peeking through the edges of windows and variable names too unique to be coincidence. He was narrating his own downfall in real time, and I was the silent archivist. Then came the twist I didn't expect. A new message popped up in my encrypted chat from an engineer on the client side of our largest contract. He had once reached out to me for emergency support years ago and still had my personal contacts saved. "You didn't get this from me," he wrote, attaching a single code snippet. My breath caught. The snippet was my patented load balancer logic, copied word for word. My unique comment tags were still there, including one with a typo I had left in during a 3 a.m. deployment 5 years ago. It was the digital equivalent of a fingerprint at the scene of a crime. I leaned back, letting the weight of the evidence sink in. Slack leaks, public bragging, private code theft, and now client-side confirmation. The fortress I had built in silence was no longer just for protection. It was a weapon. I picked up my phone and opened a secure line to my attorney, Elise Romero. No preamble, no pleasantries. I sent her the snippet and typed one sentence. They went live on my skeleton in neon socks. Her reply came in less than a minute. Understood. Prepare everything. It's almost time. The downtown law office smelled faintly of polished wood and espresso, a quiet cathedral to the kind of power that didn't need to raise its voice. I sat across from Elise Romero in a leather chair, the weight of my patent folder between us. She scrolled through the compiled evidence on her dual monitor screenshots, code snippets, Slack leaks, LinkedIn posts, her expression unreadable, but sharp as glass. 8 patents, all clean, all time-stamped, all notarized under Vericore Systems, LLC. She said finally, tapping her keyboard. They didn't just cross the line. Selena, they built a house on your side of it. I nodded, fingers laced together to keep them steady. She began to type. The soft clatter of her keyboard, almost rhythmic. The cease and desist letter was polite, but surgical. The kind of message that cut deeper because it never raised its tone. It cited each of my 8 patents by number and filing date, outlined the unauthorized use, attached the screenshots and client-side snippet as exhibits, and closed with the quiet promise of federal litigation and damages if immediate action wasn't taken. By the time the letter was finalized, she'd prepared 3 hard copies in heavy cream envelopes. Each bore the company's address and the names of board members in block letters. A courier arrived to collect them, signature required on delivery. The moment his footsteps faded down the marble hall, I felt something in my chest unlock. For 11 years, I had carried the weight of silence. Now, my silence was the strike. That night, the first ripples of panic reached me. Theo forwarded Slack messages from inside the company, time-stamped just after the envelopes hit reception. Wait, isn't this her old system? Did anyone sign the IP clearance? I thought the NDA covered it. Are we exposed? I could almost hear Gareth's voice in the frantic thread. Even if he didn't type it himself, for the first time, they were asking questions they should have asked months ago, maybe years. And every question they typed was another line of evidence for me, another reminder that arrogance makes the cleanest paper trail. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the hum of satisfaction settle over me like a second skin. The move was made. The silence had spoken, and I knew the tremor in their walls was only the beginning of the collapse that was already rolling toward them. By the 3rd day, the tremors had turned into a full collapse. Theo's updates came in bursts, a digital drumbeat of panic from the corporate high-rise I no longer belonged to. Investors were calling emergency meetings. 2 enterprise clients had already paused deployment, and a 3rd had issued a formal inquiry about the company's IP compliance status. In corporate language, that was the equivalent of a gun cocking. I sat on my porch overlooking the bay, the morning air cool against my skin, my laptop balanced on my knees. The city moved as it always did, ferries cutting the water, the bridge humming with traffic, but my world was quieter, sharper. Each email notification that popped up was another domino falling in a building I no longer had to step inside. Then Theo sent the image that made me laugh out loud, startling my cat from her nap. A blurry screenshot of a Zoom board meeting Gareth's face, pale and glistening, framed by the grainy rectangle of his home office. He looked like a man trying to smile while his house burned down behind him. Beneath the screenshot, Theo added a single line: IT just realized all old backups were wiped. No system to fall back on. I read it twice. They had purged the original architecture in their rush to ditch legacy, erasing the only functional system the company had ever relied on. With my patents revoked and the new build frozen under legal threat, they had nothing. Theo's messages kept coming, investors demanding timeline to restore operations, CEO off camera, not speaking, Gareth doing damage control, client legal teams are circling. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the soft lap of water against the pier below. I didn't need to gloat or post a single word online. The collapse was happening on its own, perfectly choreographed by their hubris. They had built a tower on stolen bones, and now the bones were gone, across the bay. The sunlight caught the windows of the office tower where I had spent over a decade. For the first time, it looked small, like a toy someone had left on a shelf. I closed my laptop, feeling the last thread of tension leave my chest. The building was falling, and I was already standing on higher ground, ready for the next move. The next morning, the kitchen was filled with soft light and the scent of fresh coffee. I poured it into my favorite chipped mug, the one with a faded cat and glasses, and leaned against the counter. The world outside my window was calm, the bay glinting as if nothing in it had changed, but I knew better. Entire careers were unraveling a few miles away, and I didn't need to lift a finger. I hadn't posted a single word online. No cryptic quotes, no self-satisfied comments. My power didn't need applause. It existed in the silence of actions already set in motion, in the weight of evidence that had moved like water through the company's walls, leaving cracks too deep to patch. My phone buzzed on the counter. A news alert. I glanced at the screen and let a slow smile rise. Startup faces IP scandal after silent architect strikes. A tech blog had picked up the story, and I didn't have to guess who had leaked it. There was always someone who couldn't resist feeding the fire once the smoke started curling. Another alert popped up. The company's stock price had dropped 8% at market open, then 12%, and still falling. A third notification followed from an internal source board announces Gareth Sloan on leave pending internal review. I imagined the boardroom I had sat in for so many years, its sterile glass walls, its cold air, and saw Gareth's empty chair. He had spent months strutting through that building like he owned the future. Now he was a footnote in the company newsletter, his vision stripped bare for everyone to see. I walked to the window, sipping my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth against the quiet satisfaction blooming in my chest. This wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even revenge in the way most people imagined it. It was balance, a correction long overdue. I thought of the years I had spent patching holes no one else saw, the nights I had coded alone under the glow of a single desk lamp. Every unnoticed effort now echoed in the silence of their panic. They had written me off as obsolete, and yet here I was, standing in the calm aftermath of a storm I had summoned without raising my voice. I set my mug down, turned toward my office, and opened my laptop to begin the next, quieter phase of my plan. The morning after the tech blogs turned my silence into headlines, I sat at my desk with the sun warming the edges of my small home office. My laptop hummed quietly as I hovered over the publish button on a page I had been refining for months. Revoked Systems. My name wasn't on the site, but it was in every line of code, in every patent filing, in every legal safeguard now woven into the framework. The architecture was clean, efficient, and signed with layers of protection that even the boldest consultant wouldn't dare cross. I clicked. The website went live without fanfare, just a quiet declaration to the world that the system they had once called outdated now stood on its own. No press release, no dramatic post, just existence and in tech. Existence backed by proof is louder than any announcement. Within hours, my inbox pinged. A message from an executive at one of Gareth's former clients, one of the enterprise accounts that had frozen implementation after the IP scandal. We're interested in speaking with Revoked about a consulting engagement. I leaned back, letting the words settle over me like sunlight. My first contract under my own name, on my own terms. Not out of revenge, not out of spite, just the clean weight of freedom. By the weekend, I decided to leave the apartment and step into the city I had ignored for too many years. Golden Gate Park was alive with runners, tourists, and the hum of an ordinary Saturday. I found a quiet bench under a sycamore tree and watched a group of children sail toy boats in the pond. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about firewalls or servers or patch notes. I was thinking about possibility. Their downfall had been loud, public, and satisfying, but it wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the space I had carved out for myself in the aftermath, the life that wasn't tethered to anyone else's neglect. I had built something enduring, not just to punish, but to start again. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the breeze carry the scent of the bay, the laughter of strangers, the distant city noise. When I opened them, I whispered the words that had been waiting at the edge of my thoughts since the day they tried to erase me. They called me outdated. But I wasn't done. I was just building my own future in fine print.